California for 15 years. So I know very well how your teacher coach is feeling. So good luck to you, coach. And I'm sure your kids will make you proud. Good luck this morning.
Hello, Oregon. I'm unmuted, which is good. I don't want to be muted. Hello, Oregon. My name is Tim Murphy. I work at the University of Chicago, where I oversee the Master of Liberal Arts program there and run some continuing education programs for high school social studies teachers. And I am always thrilled to be a part of this. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Steve,
Mr. Lindley should unmute himself.
Never happens.
Sorry, each time we go back to the room, I'm forgetting to unmute myself. Good morning, Oregon, and it's still morning in Oregon. Congratulations for reaching this point. We're looking forward to hearing from you. My name's Steve Lindley. I live in Wyoming, retired criminal justice administrator, been involved with We the People for quite a while. So we wish you well, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
All right, if you please introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Good evening, judges. We are Unit 1, and we will be discussing the historical and philosophical foundation of the American political system. We would like to thank you all for being here this morning. We would also like to thank our coaches, Marcus Wood, Debbie Menashe, our student mentor, London, and our teacher, Sadie Adams. My name is Erskine.
My name is Estelle.
My name is Max.
My name is Lila.
My name is Emily. Thank you. We are now ready for your question.
All right, here it is. The American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution. To what extent, if any, did revolutionary principles influence constitution making during the founding period? What problems, if any, does the principle of consent present when creating or amending constitutions? To what extent, if any, are revolutionary principles evident in modern times? You may begin.
In January 1787, Benjamin Rush recognized that while the war was over, the revolution persisted. The revolutionary principles persisted. These core principles were of effective governance based on popular sovereignty, consent of the governed, and expanded republicanism. These principles influenced the making of our Constitution and remain relevant today.
The Articles of Confederation established a first attempt to advance the revolutionary principles of effective government based on popular sovereignty, consent of the governed, and expanded republicanism. But the articles were critically deficient.
The Constitution made the government more effective and also reinforced popular sovereignty and consent. Key shortcomings in the articles included the inability to lay and collect taxes, to raise an army, and to regulate interstate commerce, all of which were corrected in the Constitution's Article 1, Section 8, and the failure to guarantee states a republican form of government, corrected in Article 4, Section 4.
Organizational defects in the articles included a unicameral legislature, corrected in Article 1, and the requirement for unanimous consent for amendments, which was corrected in Article 5, which outlines 2 ways to amend the Constitution, allowing both Congress and state legislatures to participate.
Governments based on popular sovereignty require consent of the governed. The Constitution was ratified per Article 7, but ratification was a close contest. Consent by 9 states was required, and it was achieved with only slim majorities in some key state conventions, such as Virginia and New York.
The formal supermajority consent process of Article 5 of the Constitution is challenging, but also insufficient if popular consent is not also obtained. The struggle to implement the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments demonstrate these difficulties. These amendments eliminated slavery and granted formerly enslaved people citizenship, voting rights, and equal protection, but they were followed by a century of effective and often violent resistance that continues even today.
Over time, the revolutionary concept of popular sovereignty has greatly expanded, with the passage of the 15th, 19th, and 26th Amendments, granting full voting rights to former slaves, women, and 18-year-olds.
Nevertheless, we still debate issues around voting rights and voter suppression. Brondvich v. DNC regarding restrictions on voting procedures in Arizona, and the recently passed vote procedure changes in Georgia are just 2 current examples of ongoing challenges to expanding popular sovereignty and voter enfranchisement.
Sustaining our revolutionary idea of an effective government based on popular sovereignty is an ongoing challenge. As Thomas Jefferson wrote, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times.
Take, for example, our current two-party system. Our nation was not founded on this idea, and thus it does not accommodate it. In our current political climate, we are often forced to choose between candidates who do not reflect our values. We have reached a point where campaigns are structured around proving a candidate's allegiance to their party rather than fulfilling their Republican duty of representing popular policies.
One solution is the top two primary, which would narrow the election down to the top two candidates, regardless of party affiliation. Another is ranked choice voting, allowing people to vote for a wider range of candidates without the wasting of votes. Both are better solutions, creating effective governance based on popular sovereignty. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Okay, if I'll go first, if my colleagues don't mind. So I want to follow up a little bit on your discussion of this these attempts at some voter suppression and whatnot. What do you foresee, maybe down the road, the outcome of all those states trying to monkey around with these electoral processes? What's the remedy, or where's this going?
As we saw in Shelby County v. Holder in 2013, key provisions of the Voting Rights Act were struck down. Section 4B, which created a formula for Section 5. Section 5 is the pre-clearance with the federal government of certain states that had history of suppressing Black voters, such as grandfather clauses, illiteracy tests, Jim Crow laws. When we saw that this was taken away, because when you take away the formula, Section 5 couldn't be used anymore, there's fear that now new legislation will be passed that will go back to suppressing Black voters. So that's what we can fear in the future.
We can look to Jacobs. We can look to Jacobs v. North Carolina, where there was very harsh voter ID laws that discriminated against African Americans, and legislation is taking paths towards making it so those harsh voter ID laws aren't as discriminatory.
Additionally, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is before the Senate, has already been passed by the House, looks to remedy the issues with the Voting Rights Act by expanding the oversight to all the states, allowing the federal government to ensure fair voting across the nation.
So what happens if it doesn't pass in the Senate, right? And it's questionable, right? That's a very divided body, and there's no guarantee that that's going to go through. What happens if it doesn't? What other remedy exists, or are there any protections?
Well, we see in the 9th Amendment that there is power reserved to the states. So the power to decide election processes, majority of this is reserved to the states. We see this with the new recent Georgia Voting Rights Act, that states do have the authority to make their own decisions about election laws.
Okay, let me follow up there. You touched on some hindrances currently to consent and popular sovereignty. You believe is it harder in a diverse nation? Are we closer to reaching those principles now or further away in your view, given the hindrances?
It's undeniable that the United States has made a lot of progress, at least over time, with enfranchisement in particular. The 15th Amendment greatly expanded voting rights, and then once again with the 17th Amendment, or not, sorry, the 19th Amendment, we saw a greater expansion, and then again when it was given to 18-year-olds.
We are not much closer to this voter enfranchisement. We see that the de jure segregation has essentially been cut out of our system, but de facto segregation still exists. For example, we talked about in Georgia, the new Georgia voting rights, which seem to cut down on absentee voting, making it so that you have to request a ballot in a smaller amount of time, basically taking away drop boxes. These things are cutting down on enfranchisement and popular sovereignty. And when we see them in today, it makes us wonder if we've really we are really this enfranchised nation that we claim to be.
Also, adding on to my colleague Erskine, not only was the 15th Amendment important in expanding popular sovereignty, not only was the 15th Amendment important in expanding popular sovereignty, the 14th was essential as well because it granted due process and equal protection in the Equal Protection Clause, which allowed voters to more confidently vote. And this was a great expansion after Ku Klux Klan attacks on Black voters.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up on this issue of popular sovereignty. It's come up a whole lot in the consent to the govern. And certainly, I have no problem with the five of you having the consent of the five of you being channeled into the government, but not everyone in the country is as well informed as you folks are. So how does that change the equation? What happens when the people whose consent we're supposed to be basing government decisions on are either misinformed or misled?
Well, a way to solve this would be civic education. So having educational systems similar to this in public school systems that would help educate citizens in a non-biased way. We saw this in Finland, where they began to input a critical thinking and civic education system in their public school system.
Additionally, through John Locke's principle of tacit consent, we can see that people, just by obeying the system and the laws of which they are governed by, also then consent to the governing system. This is a theory that was also shared by Socrates.
Additionally, according to John Locke's social contract theory, every citizen retains the right to leave a nation. They can return to a state of nature and leave the jurisdiction of a country like the United States if they wish.
What would that look like? What does that mean?
Well, Plato also wrote about this in his book, The Crito. He discussed a dialogue between Socrates and Crito about the city of Athens. Socrates described that if a man is living in a city, at any point he's able to leave. However, if he understands the laws and justice system in that city and chooses not to leave, he is thereby signing I'd say an implied contract to obey those laws.
Realistically, leaving to a direct state of nature doesn't work as easily in a modern world anymore because there are less ununified areas, but we can still see places with more stringent laws, more stringent restrictions where people can move to. Mobility is very possible in the modern era through cars, planes, and whatnot, and people can leave a nation if they do not agree with its laws.
So let me go back to a principle you brought up in the beginning as we get close to the end. You referenced one of the principles of the founding is effective government. Elaborate on that for me, if you would. What does that mean? How would we know it?
A large part of government was separation of powers defined by Montesquieu, the Enlightenment philosopher. And our government is composed of three unique separate branches, all of which check each other to enforce the rule of law.
Additionally, we can look back to Pennsylvania's original state constitution on this, where they had popular sovereignty because they had a unicameral legislature with many representatives. So each person was represented very well. However, the government was not effective. They couldn't get stuff passed because they couldn't agree. So popular sovereignty is not good enough on its own. It needs to be it needs to be effective that you can pass legislation. We also saw under the Articles of Confederation a similar problem.
Fine.
Can I finish my statement?
Finish your thought.
Okay. We saw a similar problem where we had the states could represent themselves, so people could be very well represented. However, there was no power in the federal government, and it led to chaos such as Shays' Rebellion, when states tried to levy taxes, but they couldn't because they didn't have enough power. So we need a strong central federal government to have effective government as well as popular sovereignty.
All right, thank you very much. Good job.
Good.
Yeah. So now is our time to give you some feedback, praise and constructive criticism. So I'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, it was outstanding as a package of a prepared response, which was excellently written and organized. filled with some good detail and evidence. And then the follow-up was a really nice conversation, right? That's what I look forward to this every year, to have a chance to have a conversation with 5 young, intelligent, informed, thoughtful young people that we talked with each other. You didn't give me a speech. And I appreciate that authenticity and your original thoughts. I think near the end, it was a really great sort of grappling with this whole tension, right? And that's what this is all about. Our whole entire world is just a big knot of tensions which hold it together. But so you have, on one hand, we need a solid representative system, but we also need a government that can work and get stuff done, right? And so therein lies the ongoing challenge for this country, is to figure out how those institutions work together, how our elections can work together. What I would like you to think about is to think more about how this potential voter suppression trend we're seeing is going to play out. And you referenced it later in a different answer with the 14th Amendment, right? There's also the supremacy clause. This notion that Georgia, with the 9th Amendment, reserved powers can, and it's true, they get to do things, but the 14th Amendment is our national tool to protect us. Because if I'm a minority in a state that, like Georgia, that wants to try to disenfranchise me, I'm out of luck because I'm outnumbered. But I might not be outnumbered if the 14th Amendment can be there to protect me as a national citizen, right? So it's wonderful tensions that exist out there. You're grappling with them. You're smart young people. I have no doubt you will have wonderful futures, and I feel confident for you all. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo those comments. The presentation and the back and forth was, it's fun when we get to grapple a little bit because these issues are so knotty that even if you say something we agree with, I could, play devil's advocate just to go down the road a little bit. And you guys were, you were game for that. You're on your feet and ready to go. The evident preparation was impressive. I think it's like my constructive criticism thing. It's going to be the same as Mr. Fox's, which just means that there's not a lot that we can nitpick here. You guys did great. But talking about the Shelby County and then Jacobs v. North Carolina, and so well, the states ultimately can help remedy this, but that's more difficult when the states themselves are the problem, which is why the national 14th Amendment thing is, among others, is a good remedy. I would say that in response to my question about what happens when the people are misled, Finland's a great example that I now know about thanks to your answer. But it's not just civic education, although we're here and that's really important. What I appreciated in that answer was critical thinking too, because that's you can't have civic education, you can't have any education without critical and independent thought. So tying those things in together is well done. I could talk for 30 more minutes about things I like, but I'll let Mr. Lindley jump in and wrap us up.
Well, trifecta then, very nicely done. Again, commendations and congratulations to you folks. Thanks and congratulations to your coaches, student mentor and teacher. Your cross participation was impressive and you complemented each other nicely. You also could counter one another on occasion, which is to Mr. Murphy's point of critical thinking and the ability to make an argument in that regard, supported with strong evidence and information that you had readily available, which indicated your hours and hours of preparation and months for that. Your variety of references and the difficult issues that you struggle with. I mean, the classical Republican ideas and how that plays off in a place as diverse as the United States. Kind of what's that look like? So, and as well as your reflection on state of nature and my question were, how does that even work? And you kind of wrestling with that as well. So very nicely done. It was, as the other two judges said, nice to have that conversation. You're impressive folks each, and we wish you well.
Congratulations. I'm stopping the recording now and